Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you are new. Today we are going to have a relaxing afternoon in the kitchen. No massive preservation projects, just some really yummy recipes for this Friday afternoon. It has been a busy food preservation season, and to be honest, on this Friday, I don't have it in me to do a big preservation project. And we are gonna make some apple hand pies for Josh and I to enjoy tonight as a yummy dinner and for the weekend as a yummy snack. And for dinner tonight, we are gonna make nachos out of these potatoes. I found a really interesting, intriguing recipe online. I will link the hand pie recipe and the nacho recipe down in the description box. The hand pie recipe calls for store-bought pie crust. I thought since we're just gonna enjoy the afternoon in the kitchen, I would take a minute to make some homemade pie crust. I can show you how easy it is. We're gonna use the food processor. So that's what we're gonna start with today. Apple pie is one of Josh's favorite desserts. So this is gonna be a special treat for the weekend. So I'm gonna start with 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And this is an all butter pie crust recipe. Next, I'm gonna add 1 cup of butter, but I'm gonna go ahead and get this butter cubed before I put it into the food processor. This is very, very cold butter, not frozen, but cold. This doesn't have to be perfect because we're gonna use the food processor to process the butter. Now we're gonna add salt for flavor, a little bit of sugar for browning, and I'm gonna pulse this in. You can mix the water in the food processor if you want, but I do prefer to do it in a separate bowl so I can control the amount of water a little bit better. And I'm gonna get in here and kind of flatten the butter just a little bit. I like to take the butter between my fingers, kind of smush them. So here's a pretty big piece. I'm just gonna smush it till it's flat. And there we go. Now we're gonna add the water. I have just a little over 1/2 cup of ice water here. When I make pie crust, I start with 1/2 cup, but sometimes it takes a couple more tablespoons to get to the proper consistency. So we're gonna start with that, and I'm gonna use a fork and just fluff it in here and work that water into the crust, or into the dough, because it's not crust yet. Usually it takes 1/2 cup plus a tablespoon for me, but depending on the humidity at your home, it can vary just a little bit, and you want to use as little water as possible to make a dough. And I don't like to use my hands for this part because I don't want to touch the butter any more than I need to. That's enough water right there. So I don't even know if I used a whole 1/2 cup on that. I'm gonna work this pastry into a ball. You might need to use just a tad more water on the bottom part here. Just a couple drops. That is beautiful. Okay, perfect. Now that we have our dough where we want it, I'm gonna put a piece of saran wrap down. I'm gonna take my dough and put it onto the saran wrap. I'm gonna form it into a rectangle. This crust recipe makes 2 pies, and I'm gonna make, I think, square hand pies is what I'm thinking. So if I roll it into, or if I push it into a rectangle, that'll make it easier to roll it out. But if you were gonna make pie with this, You would divide this dough in two, roll it into discs, and use it that way. So I'm gonna stick this in the fridge while we make the filling for our pie. When I was looking up hand pie recipes online, a lot of them call for store-bought pie crust and jarred apple pie filling. Well, I have fresh apples from the garden, and so I was able to find a recipe where we're gonna kind of make an apple pie filling on the stove before we fill the little hand pies. I did this last year when I preserved peaches. I made a bunch of peach hand pies and then I froze them, and that was such an awesome thing to have in the freezer on days we wanted just a quick dessert, and I did not have to go through the effort of making the hand pies. But a quick way to do this is if you had apple pie filling or cherry pie filling or any kind of pie filling on hand, you could certainly do this. And if you had some store-bought pie crust or you had some homemade pie crust in the freezer, you could whip these up really quickly. But today we're gonna go through the effort of kind of doing all the steps together. And then next week I will be preserving apples. I'll be doing a big bulk apple preservation day, but today is just you and I hanging out in the kitchen, relaxing, getting these two little projects done. Now, I haven't washed these apples yet, but I kind of want to wash them after I peel them, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the time to peel them, and then we will go take them to the sink, and I'll wash them in the sink. These are 100% organic apples. So some of them have what could be, a little bit of bug damage on them. So I am looking through here and trying to find the ones that potentially have that and then use those ones first. But I will be getting to taking care of the bulk of these apples next week. The recipe says to have these be chunks, but I think I'm going to prefer slices. So I'm going to slice these apples. This one has evidence of some bug damage. So all we have to do is cut around that, and the majority of the apple is just fine. But these apples are going to need to be dealt with because the ones that have the bug damage, they're not going to last in the refrigerator very long. They'll have to do a big kind of processing day early next week. I do have an apple core peeler slicer, but on this day, a cutting board and a knife was all I needed, and a potato peeler for these few apples we needed to prep. I am very excited though to share with you this potato recipe. I don't know where I got the idea. I probably saw it on a reel or something. It is so delicious. I've already made it a second time since we made it on this day. The cool thing about this recipe that we're gonna make is you can really change up the flavor depending on what you have on hand. And it could be one of those recipes that's kind of a go-to recipe when you need something quick and you have just a bunch of, random ingredients in your house. Well, that wasn't very hard to peel that amount of apples. Now we're gonna make the pie filling, and we basically need to make a pie filling, a kind of a cooked version like you would get when you buy canned pie filling, because they're hand pies, they're not gonna cook as long in the oven. So I just added about maybe 2 tablespoons of butter. This doesn't have to be an exact science here. And we're gonna cook these down so that the apples can release some of their moisture and they will be fully cooked when we pull them out of the oven. Now we get to add the sweeteners. I have a 1/2 cup of sugar here, and I'm gonna add just a little bit, maybe about 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. I'm gonna take the juice of 1/2 lemon and I'm gonna squeeze this on the top, and we're gonna let this cook until the apples are soft. I do have a thickener that I still need to add to our pie filling, and it already smells so good in here. But while that is cooking down, we can get started on dinner. And I'm gonna peel these potatoes. I went down and looked at the potatoes down there and I grabbed the ones that just looked like they needed to be used up the soonest. So let's get these peeled and get these ready to go into the oven as well. I just preheated one of the ovens to 400 degrees and the other oven to 425. Normally I would leave the skins on, but the skins on these don't look super great. So I'm gonna take a second to peel it and I will wash these again after I get them all peeled. So I'll just stick them in my colander here. Some of these were potatoes that when we were harvesting, we kind of nicked them a little bit. So they need to be used up. So this is a perfect way to try a new recipe. Once I get all these potatoes peeled up, I'm going to take my potatoes and I'm going to wash them again for a second time, and then I'm going to take these peels and get these peels composted. I don't give my chickens potato peels, and so these are just going to go in the compost pile and let them go back to the earth. I don't always, like I said, peel potatoes, but these were some rough looking potatoes, but once we get them washed and peeled, they are beautiful and no one knows that they had some serious damage on them. So now I'm going to take these potatoes and I'm going to slice them very, very, well, I say very, very thin, but now that I'm looking at them, I don't slice them super thin. So they're probably between like 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch thick. Oh, okay, I do go back and slice that one in half. So I do slice them thin, and then I make this recipe using some pork that I had in my freezer that was pre-cooked. But the cool thing about this recipe is you could easily adapt this to a vegetarian recipe if you didn't have any cooked meat on hand, or if you wanted just to have a vegetarian night. Because this has these potatoes in it instead of chips, we're using these potatoes in place of chips to make these nachos. It's very hearty and delicious. So I'm going to get these potato rounds onto a lined cookie sheet. I'm going to lay them a little bit flat, and then we are going to get them seasoned up. I really hope we like these potato nachos, because I've got a lot of potatoes downstairs, and this is a really fun and unique way to use potatoes, other than your traditional mashed potatoes or roasted potatoes. Definitely adds a new little flair to them. So we are gonna season up these potatoes. I just put olive oil over the top. That was salt. Here's some Cajun seasoning. This is what the recipe I'm following as inspiration calls for. And I thought the Cajun seasoning was a great idea, but I'm gonna add a few more ingredients as well. I got out some onion powder. I'm gonna sprinkle this on the top. And then I also got out some garlic powder. Josh and I love garlic, and I put it on almost everything. Hard to go wrong with that. And then some good old black pepper. And now I'm gonna mix all this together. I wish you could smell my house right now. It smells incredible between the apples cooking on the stove, the Cajun seasoning and garlic and salt and pepper. It is wonderful. So I'm gonna get all these evenly coated, and then I'm gonna try to lay them out as flat as possible so that they have as much surface area kind of with the heat exposure as possible, so that hopefully they get nice and crispy. I'm putting these in the 425 degree oven. I was pretty generous with the oil because I want them to get really crispy. I bet you could cook these in an air fryer. I don't have an air fryer, but that would probably be a really great way to cook these up, to get them almost like potato chips. It would probably be best to put these on 2 cookie sheets, but I think we're just gonna make this 1 cookie sheet work. My camera died. I think that's the first time that's ever happened, but I just sprinkled, I don't know if you saw it, 2 tablespoons of flour onto our apples. Our apples are nice and tender, and they've kind of thickened up a little bit. So we're gonna roll out our pastry now. Now that the pastry's had time to chill in the fridge, I'm gonna put my mat down, my silicone mat, grab my rolling pin, And I'm gonna let the apple mixture just kind of cool here a little bit while we roll out our pastry. We do have some more toppings, some goodie toppings we're gonna put on top of our nachos. I've got some pork in the refrigerator that I took out of the freezer yesterday. When we did the 5 Instant Pot recipes, I made some pork tinga tacos, and I made more than we needed, and so I froze half of it, and we're gonna top our nachos with that, plus we're gonna make some toppings from the garden to go on top of our nachos. But first, I wanna get these pies in the oven so they can cool, and we can enjoy a yummy dessert tonight. I have tile granite countertops, and so I always like to use this silicone mat when rolling out pastry. And I'm gonna try to keep this as best as I can in a rectangle. And I like to keep working the dough, flipping it over. We'll just roll that piece right back in. The beauty about being the boss of your own kitchen is you have the right to change your mind. I was gonna make hand pies. I decided I'm gonna make a galette instead. So I've got a cookie sheet here and my pastry rolled out, probably bigger than it needed to be. Well, this is 2 pie crusts worth. Oh friend, the struggle of having the freedom to do whatever I want is, now I'm thinking I might go back to my original idea. So I am going to cut on my silicone mat, but I am going to be very, well, yeah, ginger. I'm just scoring it. I'm not really pressing down. I don't like doing that. I'm not gonna do that. Okay, let's do this. Let's move that out of the way. There we go. I'm gonna take half my pastry, and now I have it here. These are going to be rustic, totally rustic. Start with that. I think I'm gonna make 3 today, and then I'll freeze the rest of them. I'm gonna crimp the ends once I get these 3 filled and I grab a fork. I think I'm gonna make 4. I think my hand pies actually turned out cuter than I was expecting. So I'm going to take a fork and crimp the edges. I did take a knife and clean up the edges so that all the edges had a nice sharp edge and not a jaggedy edge from rolling it out. I still have quite a bit of pie filling and pastry, so I'm gonna see how many total I can get out of this one batch of hand pies. I do need to put vent holes in them, so I'm going to put 3 fork pokes, and those are adorable. We're going to put an egg wash on. I would like to be able to get 4 more hand pies out of this dough here, and let's see if we can do it. Hand pies are a fun thing to know how to make because you can really get creative with the fillings. One way I really like to make hand pies is if I have extra pie crust like in my freezer or something like that and I want a quick dessert, you can fill them with jelly and then you can make yourself basically like a Pop-Tart, a homemade Pop-Tart that tastes so good, and you can whip those together really quickly if you have just some pre-made crust in your freezer or some store-bought crust. This last one's going to be a large one, so when I bake this up, because I want to make sure I can use all of these apples and I don't want to roll this dough out one more time. So this will be a 2-serving hand pie. Let's put the apples a little bit closer to one edge. Fold it over, more like a, what is this called? A calzone, like a calzone. Fold that up, crimp the edges. Let's see if I can make this look prettier. I'm gonna take my fork, rub it in some flour, and crimp these edges together. I am gonna poke holes in the top because I'm gonna bake these from frozen. I need to crimp the edge of these 2 little ones. I'm gonna go ahead and flash freeze these, which just means I'm gonna stick them in the freezer, let them get completely frozen. Then I'm gonna put them in a freezer safe bag. And just like that, we have dessert for tonight, dinner's going, and dessert for another night. This has been so enjoyable just to kind of focus on smaller quantities. You can see over there we still have tomatoes that need to be processed. I need to harvest a bunch of tomatoes. We've got all these apples we need to process, but it was fun, or it's fun just to kind of sometimes take a step back from the really big projects and focus on just making a nice dinner for tonight and experimenting with new recipes. Let's make some pico de gallo to top our nachos. I got distracted and it's been about 15 minutes and I've not made the pico de gallo yet, but the recipe says we're supposed to flip these potatoes and I wanted to do that before I made the pico. So that's what we're gonna do now. If I don't flip every single one, I think that's gonna be okay, but I do wanna flip the majority of them because I want them to get pretty crispy. I'm gonna stick these back in the oven for not that much longer. So I just went out into the garden and harvested this absolutely beautiful tomato, and we're gonna slice this and dice this pretty small along with a couple of our garden fresh onions. This is where you can have total creative freedom and have a lot of fun picking the toppings you want to put onto your potato nachos. I'm using what I have here, which is a ton of tomatoes coming out of the garden and some sweet onions. These onions are so delicious that I have coming out of the garden. They are strong, but they are sweet at the same time. They're probably the best onions I've ever grown. Not the largest, but the flavor is pretty fantastic. But if you didn't have ingredients for fresh pico de gallo, but you had, a jar of salsa or hot sauce or whatever it might be, that would be great to put on top. If you had ingredients for guacamole, that would be really good. I haven't been buying avocados because I've been trying to use what comes out of my garden, but I might be trying that later this year. I also grabbed a bunch of cilantro from the garden. We'll get this chopped up. I'm going to save some to sprinkle on the top. I think our pies are done. Josh, does it smell good in here? Oh, turn the light off. Look how beautiful those are. That is going to be a delicious treat. I do need to finish this Pico. I'm going to add some lemon juice because I already cut this one in half. If I had lime juice, I would use that, but I don't want to waste this lemon, so we're going to use this. And I just got a bunch of seeds in there that I'm going to fish out real quick. I'm going to season this with some salt and just a pinch of cumin. I'm going to mix this together. I'm going to let it sit for a couple minutes and then we'll give it a taste test and see if we need to adjust the seasonings. The only other thing we have to prep for dinner is some cheese, and then I also grabbed out of the garden a sugar rush peach pepper and a jalapeno, and we're going to get those sliced up so we can top our nachos with those. I think I'm going to taste a piece of this sugar rush peach pepper because my peppers have been changing how hot they are throughout the growing season. Oh, okay. Woo! That's probably the hottest pepper that has come out of my garden yet because I've been letting it ripen on the vine. Let's try the jalapeno. I think I'm gonna leave those off and we can just top our own plates with that. I probably will top my plate with it. I don't know if Josh will want to. So I think we can go ahead and put our meat and cheese onto the nachos. I'm pretty sure we're gonna like this. I may have already tried one of these potatoes and they are fantastic. So we need to finish them up, and let me show you how the recipe explained to do this. Can you see how nice and crispy some of them got? Absolutely delicious. It said what we need to do is kind of pile them up closer to each other. You could really put any toppings on this you want, beans, any kind of cheese you prefer, olives, peppers. I'm gonna put some of this pork tinga taco meat on it. If I didn't have this pork prepped and ready to go, I probably would skip putting the meat on it and having this be kind of a quick dinner and just open a jar of black beans or something like that. But I happen to have this, so we're gonna use it. So I'm going to top everything with this cheddar cheese. Good amount of cheese. And now we're just gonna pop this back in the oven until the meat warms through and the cheese gets all melted and ooey and gooey. The potatoes are already fully cooked, so we just need all the toppings to get nice and perfectly delicious. While that's cooking, I'm gonna finish cleaning up this kitchen. You know what I think I'm gonna do? Instead of clean up the kitchen, I'm gonna give this hand pie a try. Josh is outside putting wasp traps up because we have a wasp problem. Oh my goodness. Can you see how flaky that pastry is? There's just so many layers. Okay. I'm setting it down. I'm gonna clean the kitchen. Midway through cleaning, Josh walked by and I thought I would give him the hand pie.
Oh, that's good.
Those are from our apples.
Ooh.
Smell good?
Smells really good. That sounds like a bad oof, but it's a good oof.
It's a good oof.
Mm-hmm.
You like it?
Nice and crispy.
Good.
Very good. Very
Is it the proper sweetness? The apples aren't super sweet.
Sure.
Okay, good.
For sure, it's great.
All right, well, dinner/lunch dinner will be ready in, it's already 4 o'clock, but Josh and I haven't eaten lunch yet, so it's gonna be, what would between dinner and lunch be?
Like a
Lunder?
A
A dinner? Yeah, we're gonna have dinner tonight. Okay, let me get this kitchen clean. It smells so good. This is done. This was so easy. I think we are going to really enjoy it. I've got a couple more things to put on the top to not only make it taste top notch, but to make it really, really pretty. So right now it's not much of a looker, but I have some corn relish, and I did drain this corn relish. I didn't have that much left. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the whole thing on here, the rest that I had in the jar. I did some quick pickles on some onions yesterday. So I'm gonna top this with the pickled onions. That's gonna add such a yummy brightness to this, and look at the color it adds. Stunning. Pickled onions are one of Josh and I's absolute favorites. Now we're gonna take the cilantro that I chopped, and I'll do a couple dollops of sour cream. And that, my friend, is a delicious dinner. Let's give this a taste test. I'm gonna taste this one right here. I'm gonna put a little bit of our sour cream. Oops. I'm gonna put a little bit of our sour cream. I have a piece of crunchy cheese there. Let's give this a try. Let me top it with one of our onions. Yum. I also have out our jalapenos, our pico de gallo, and some hot sauce. My friend, we may have just made one of our new favorite dinners. This is fantastic. The cool thing about this meal is you could really change it up depending on what you have on hand. You could, if you have some leftover taco meat, you could make this and it would taste quite a bit different than, say, traditional tacos, because it has that potato flavor. But oh my goodness, I am so glad I have a ton of potatoes to go through, because I will be making this again. It was really, really easy. So I can link my inspiration recipe that I followed down in the description box. I did not follow it to a T, but it was definitely the kind of like the building blocks of how I built this recipe. But I think really just take some potatoes, season them how you want, cook them in a really hot oven, top them with cheese and whatever other toppings you want. You could even make this into like a loaded baked potato. So instead of doing the taco meat and the cilantro, you could put bacon or chili. You could do like a chili potato. Anyway, really good. Thank you for being here, friend, as we just kind of spent a relaxing afternoon in the kitchen making 2 recipes. It was wonderful. So thank you for being here. I can pop some of my other videos here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.